To our amazing viewers at Hearth, we'd love to hear which part of the world you're joining us from. Let us know in the comments. Now, let's dive into today's story. My daughter asked for $50,000 for her wedding, and when I refused, her fiancé brought me a special tea the next day that nearly ended my life. What I discovered about the man she planned to marry would shock you to your core. My name is Evelyn Hartford, and at 72 years old, I thought I'd seen every kind of deception imaginable. After 35 years serving as a federal judge, I'd witnessed fraud, manipulation, and betrayal in forms most people couldn't fathom. But nothing had prepared me for the moment when I realized that the greatest threat to my life was sitting across from me at my own dining table, calling me Mom. The Hartford estate had been my sanctuary for 15 years, ever since I'd retired from the bench. Nestled in the affluent Beacon Hill neighborhood of Boston, the Victorian mansion had been Charles's pride and joy before cancer took him 5 years ago. Now its 14 rooms echoed with memories and the occasional visit from my daughter Sophia, though those visits had become increasingly rare since she'd started dating Marcus. That crisp October morning began like any other. I was in my study, reviewing documents for the Hartford Foundation, a charity I'd established to help underprivileged children access legal representation. The mahogany-paneled room overlooked the garden where Charles had spent his final summers, and I often found comfort in the view when difficult decisions weighed on my mind. The sound of tires on the circular driveway interrupted my concentration. Through the bay windows, I watched Sophia's silver Mercedes pull up to the front steps. At 35, my daughter still possessed the same graceful elegance that had made her the belle of every social event in her 20s. But lately, there was something different about her, a nervous energy that seemed to follow her like a shadow. Sophia emerged from the car wearing a cream-colored dress that probably cost more than most people earned in a week. Her auburn hair was styled in perfect waves, and her makeup was flawless, but I could see tension in the set of her shoulders. She wasn't alone. Marcus climbed out of the passenger side, adjusting his expensive suit jacket with the kind of practiced motion that suggested vanity rather than comfort. "Mother," Sophia called out as she entered my study without knocking, her voice carrying that particular pitch that meant she wanted something significant. "We need to discuss something important with you." I set down my reading glasses and studied my daughter's face. The brightness in her eyes looked forced, and there was a tremor in her hands that she was trying to hide. "Of course, sweetheart. Please, both of you, sit down." Marcus settled into the leather chair across from my desk with the casual confidence of someone who belonged everywhere he went. "Mrs. Hartford," he said, flashing that practiced smile, "thank you for seeing us on such short notice." "It's always a pleasure to see you both," I replied, though something about Marcus's demeanor immediately put me on guard. In 35 years of evaluating witnesses and defendants, you develop an instinct for detecting deception. Every alarm bell in my legal mind was ringing. "Mother," Sophia began, perching on the edge of her chair like a bird ready to take flight, "we have wonderful news. We've set a date for the wedding." I felt a smile tug at my lips despite my reservations about Marcus. Sophia deserved happiness, and if this man could provide it, I was willing to support her choice. "That's wonderful, darling. When are you planning the ceremony?" "June 15th. We found the perfect venue, the Fairmont Copley Plaza. The ballroom is absolutely magical, and the garden terrace overlooks the city." I nodded approvingly. The Fairmont was certainly elegant, though I suspect it wasn't inexpensive. "That sounds lovely. Have you begun making arrangements?" This is where Marcus leaned forward, his expression becoming more serious. "That's actually why we're here, Mrs. Hartford. We've been working with the wedding planner, and the costs are quite substantial. Between the venue, catering, flowers, photography, and all the other details Sophia has her heart set on, we're looking at a significant investment." The word investment struck me as an odd choice when discussing a wedding, but I kept my expression neutral. I see. And what kind of budget are you working with? Sophia's cheeks flushed slightly. The total cost will be around $50,000. It sounds like a lot, but when you consider that this is a once-in-a-lifetime event and we want everything to be perfect, $50,000. The figure hung in the air between us like smoke from a gun. It wasn't that I couldn't afford it. The Hartford estate was worth several $1,000,000, and my investments provided more than enough income for a comfortable lifestyle. But something about the way they presented this request felt rehearsed, calculated. That is quite substantial, I said carefully. Have you considered a smaller ceremony, something more intimate? Marcus's smile flickered for just a moment, and I caught a glimpse of something harder underneath the charm. We've discussed it, of course, but Sophia deserves the wedding of her dreams. She's waited so long to find true love. The way he said true love made my skin crawl, though I couldn't articulate exactly why. There was something theatrical about his delivery, like an actor who'd rehearsed his lines but couldn't quite make them sound natural. Mother, Sophia said, her voice taking on a pleading quality. I know it's a lot to ask, but you've always supported my dreams. This wedding represents the beginning of my future with Marcus, and I want it to be everything we've imagined. I looked at my daughter, really looked at her, and saw something that broke my heart. The confident, independent woman who'd earned her MBA and run her own consulting firm for years had been replaced by someone uncertain, almost desperate. Whatever hold Marcus had over her was stronger than I realized. Sophia, sweetheart, I said gently, I know you love me and want you to be happy, but $50,000 is a significant sum, and I'd like some time to consider this request. The transformation in Marcus was immediate and disturbing. His practiced smile vanished, replaced by an expression of barely controlled irritation. Time to consider it, he repeated, his voice dropping to a colder register. Mrs. Hartford, we're not asking for charity. This is an investment in your daughter's happiness. Marcus, Sophia whispered, placing a warning hand on his arm. But he continued, his mask slipping further. I mean, what else are you going to spend the money on? You live alone in this enormous house surrounded by expensive things that no one else will ever enjoy. At least this way your wealth would serve a purpose. The room fell silent except for the tick of the antique clock on my mantel. I'd heard similar arguments from defendants over the years. The entitled belief that other people's resources should be available to solve their problems. It never ended well. I think this conversation has gotten off track, I said, my judicial training helping me maintain composure despite my growing unease. I need time to consider your request. Surely you can understand that. Marcus started to respond, but Sophia cut him off. Of course, Mother. We didn't mean to pressure you. Take all the time you need. But as they prepared to leave, Marcus turned back with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Mrs. Hartford, I hope you'll remember that family is the most important thing in life. People who isolate themselves from family often find that loneliness can be dangerous. The implied threat was subtle but unmistakable. As I watched their car disappear down the driveway, I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the October weather. Whatever Marcus Romano really was, he wasn't the loving fiancé he pretended to be. That night, I made a decision that would save my life. I called my old colleague, FBI agent Patricia Wells, and asked her to run a background check on Marcus Romano. Some instincts, once developed in a courtroom, never fade. The background check on Marcus Romano came back the next morning, and the results confirmed my worst fears. Patricia's voice was grim when she called with the information. Evelyn, you need to be very careful around this man, Patricia said without preamble. Marcus Romano is a known alias for someone named Marcus Castellano, and he has a history you're not going to like. I gripped the phone tighter, already dreading what I was about to hear. Tell me everything. 3 states, 5 identities, and at least 2 suspicious deaths of elderly victims who were romantically involved with younger partners, Patricia continued. The pattern is always the same. He charms his way into wealthy families, usually through a romantic relationship with an adult child, then manipulates his way into inheritance situations. My blood ran cold. The 2 deaths, how suspicious are we talking? Suspicious enough that there's still open investigations, one in Connecticut, one in Florida. Both involved elderly women who died suddenly after changing their wills to benefit their children's romantic partners. Natural causes on the death certificates, but timing that raised red flags. I sank into my desk chair, processing the implications. Patricia, my otter is completely under his influence. She's never acted this way before. Desperate, almost manic about this wedding. That's part of the pattern. These men are expert manipulators. They isolate their targets from friends and family, create financial emergencies that require immediate solutions, and gradually gain control over their victims' decision-making. What can we do legally? Can you arrest him? Patricia's sigh was audible through the phone. Not without concrete evidence of current criminal activity. Being suspected of previous crimes isn't enough for an arrest warrant. But Evelyn, I'm assigning agents to monitor your property. If he makes any move against you, we'll be ready. After ending the call, I sat in my study staring out at the garden, trying to process the fact that my daughter was romantically involved with a potential serial killer. The Marcus, who'd smiled at me yesterday, who'd held Sophia's hand and talked about their future together, was apparently a predator who specialized in murdering elderly women for their money. Around noon, the sound of a car in my driveway interrupted my dark thoughts. Through the window, I watched Sophia's Mercedes pull up again, but this time she was alone. She moved differently than she had yesterday, less nervous, more purposeful, carrying what appeared to be a gift bag. "Mother," she called out as she entered through the kitchen door, "I brought you something special." I joined her in the kitchen, noting that she seemed calmer than she had in months. Her movements were more like the confident daughter I remembered, though there was still something I couldn't quite identify in her demeanor. "I felt terrible about yesterday," Sophia continued, pulling items from the gift bag. "Marcus can be intense about planning, and I think we came across as pushy. I wanted to apologize and bring you a peace offering." She produced an elegant tin of tea and a beautiful ceramic mug painted with delicate flowers. "This is a special blend I found at that boutique shop on Newberry Street, the one you love. It's called Serenity Garden, and the shop owner said it's perfect for relaxation and reflection." The tea tin was beautiful, decorated with images of herbs and flowers, and the description on the label mentioned chamomile, lavender, and several other botanicals I didn't recognize. "How thoughtful of you, sweetheart." "I thought we could have a cup together," Sophia said, already moving to fill the kettle, "like we used to when you were little and I'd come home from court stressed about a difficult case." The memory was sweet. Those quiet afternoons when Sophia would insist on making tea for both of us, believing that it would help me unwind from the pressures of the federal bench. But something about this moment felt different, rehearsed, in a way that reminded me uncomfortably of Marcus's performance yesterday. "That sounds lovely," I said, settling into one of the kitchen chairs while watching Sophia prepare the tea with unusual precision. She measured the loose tea leaves carefully, timed the steeping exactly, and presented me with the floral mug while keeping a plain white cup for herself. The tea smelled pleasant, floral and earthy, with an underlying sweetness that was quite appealing. "To new beginnings," Sophia said, raising her cup in a toast. I lifted my own mug, but something made me hesitate. Perhaps it was 35 years of judicial skepticism, Or maybe it was the conversation with Patricia still fresh in my mind. I found myself studying my daughter's face more carefully than I had in years. Sophia was watching me intently, waiting for me to drink. Her pupils seemed dilated, and there was a fine sheen of perspiration on her forehead, despite the cool October weather. Most telling of all, while she held her own cup, I noticed she hadn't actually taken a sip. "You know, darling," I said, setting down my mug without drinking, "I've been thinking about your wedding request." "Oh?" Sophia's voice was carefully neutral, but I saw her grip tighten on her teacup. "I've decided that you're right. This is a once-in-a-lifetime event, and I want you to have everything you've dreamed of." Relief flooded Sophia's face, and she finally took a sip of her own tea. "Mother, that's wonderful. Marcus will be so pleased. We can start making the final arrangements immediately." Actually, I continued, watching her carefully, "I'd like to discuss some details with Marcus. Perhaps he could join us for tea this afternoon." Sophia's expression flickered with something that might have been panic. He's in meetings all day. Investment consultations, you know. Very demanding clients." "Of course. Then perhaps tomorrow," I suggested, noting how her hand trembled slightly as she set down her cup. "I'll check his schedule," she said quickly. "Mother, aren't you going to try the tea? It's getting cold." I picked up my mug again, bringing it close to my lips, while watching Sophia over the rim. Her entire body was tense, focused on my every movement with an intensity that was deeply unsettling. The tea smelled wrong. Beneath the floral notes, there was something else, a bitter, almost metallic scent that reminded me of the chemistry lab where I'd volunteered during law school. My judicial training had taught me to trust my instincts, and every instinct I possessed was screaming danger. "You know what?" I said, setting down the mug again. "I think I'll wait until it cools a bit more. I don't want to burn my tongue." Sophia's face went pale. "Mother, please, the tea is perfect now. If you wait much longer, it won't taste right." The desperation in her voice confirmed my worst fears. My own daughter, the child I raised, educated, and loved unconditionally, was trying to poison me. "Sophia," I said quietly, my heart breaking with every word, "what's in this tea?" "Nothing," she said quickly, too quickly. "Just herbs and flowers, exactly like the label says." I stood up slowly, backing away from the table while keeping my eyes on my daughter. Sophia's composure cracked completely. Tears began streaming down her face, and her hand shook as she gripped the edge of the table. "Mother, please, you have to drink the tea. He said it would be peaceful, that you wouldn't suffer." The confession hit me like a physical blow. He's here, isn't he? Waiting to see if his plan worked. As if summoned by my words, I heard the soft sound of footsteps in the hallway. Marcus appeared in the kitchen doorway, no longer bothering to hide his true nature behind a charming smile. "Mrs. Hartford, I really wished you had just drunk the tea." Marcus stepped fully into my kitchen, and I saw him clearly for the first time without his mask of charm. His eyes were flat and calculating, like a predator evaluating prey. He moved with the confidence of someone who believed he was in complete control of the situation. "Sophia, darling," he said, his tone mockingly gentle, "why don't you try to convince your mother one more time? Explain to her how much easier this will be if she cooperates." My daughter looked between us with the expression of someone caught in a nightmare she couldn't escape. "Marcus, please. Maybe we can find another way. Maybe she'll change her mind about the money." "There is no other way," Marcus cut her off sharply. "We've been planning this for months, Sophia. Your mother is a smart woman. She's already suspicious, and it's only a matter of time before she starts digging into my background. We can't let that happen. I felt a chill run down my spine as I realized the full scope of their plan. This wasn't just about wedding money. This was about my entire estate. With me dead and Sophia as my sole heir, they would inherit everything. "How long have you been planning this?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady while my mind raced through possible escape routes. Marcus smiled, and it was the most terrifying expression I'd ever seen. "Since our second date, actually. Sophia told me all about her wealthy mother, the federal judge who lived alone in that big house. It sounded like the perfect opportunity." "You're sick," I whispered, looking at Sophia. "How could you let him manipulate you into this?" "She didn't take much convincing," Marcus replied before Sophia could speak. "Amazing how quickly people can rationalize murder when there's enough money involved. Sophia's been living paycheck to paycheck, you know. Her consulting business isn't nearly as successful as she pretended. She was desperate." Sophia flinched as if she'd been slapped. "That's not. I never wanted—" "Marcus, you said we were just going to ask for money. And when that didn't work, we moved to plan B. Which is why you're going to drink that tea, Mrs. Hartford, one way or another." I backed further away from the table, my mind working furiously. The FBI agents Patricia had assigned were supposedly monitoring my property, but I hadn't seen any sign of them. My cell phone was in my study, too far away to be useful. The landline kitchen was on the counter near Marcus, effectively out of reach. "What exactly is in the tea?" I asked, hoping to buy time while I formulated a plan. "Nothing too exotic," Marcus replied casually. "A combination of herbs that will cause heart failure in someone your age. Completely natural, nothing that would show up in a standard autopsy. You'll just appear to have died peacefully in your sleep." "After drinking tea with your daughter," I pointed out. "That won't look suspicious at all." Marcus's smile widened. "Sophia will be devastated, of course. She'll tell everyone how she came to apologize for yesterday's argument, how you seemed tired and stressed, how you complained about chest pains while drinking the tea. She'll call 911 in hysterics, but unfortunately, it will be too late." The calculation behind his plan was both impressive and terrifying. He'd thought through every detail, every potential question that might arise, but there was one thing he hadn't considered. "There's just one problem with your plan," I said, surprising both of them with the steadiness of my voice. "What's that?" Marcus asked, though he didn't look concerned. "I didn't drink the tea." Marcus's expression darkened. "That's easily remedied. Sophia, hold your mother's arms while I help her drink." "Marcus, no!" Sophia stepped back in horror. "I can't do that. I won't." "You don't have a choice," Marcus snarled, his facade of control cracking. "We're too far in to back out now. Either she drinks the tea, or we find another way to solve this problem." He reached into his jacket and pulled out what looked like a small medical syringe. "This contains a concentrated version of what's in the tea, much faster acting, though considerably less peaceful." Sophia began crying in earnest now. "Marcus, please, this isn't what we agreed to. You said it would be gentle, that she wouldn't know what was happening." "Plans change," Marcus replied coldly. "Your mother is too smart for her own good. She figured out something was wrong before drinking enough to kill her. Now we have to improvise." I realized that this was my moment. While Marcus was focused on threatening me with the syringe, and Sophia was lost in her breakdown, I had a brief window of opportunity. "Before you kill me," I said loudly, hoping my voice would carry beyond the kitchen, "I want to know something. How many other families have you destroyed? How many other daughters have you turned into murderers?" Marcus paused, tilting his head as if considering whether to answer. "You really want to know? I think I deserve to understand who's killing me and why." Fair enough, Marcus said, seeming to relax slightly. You're actually number 6. Well, you would be if you drunk the tea like you were supposed to. The others were easier, less suspicious, more trusting, but they all had one thing in common. Which was what? They all had daughters who were desperate enough to betray them for money. The cruelty of his words seemed to shock even Sophia. She looked at him with growing horror, as if seeing him clearly for the first time. You told me this was different. You said you loved me. Marcus laughed, a sound devoid of any warmth. Sophia, darling, I've told 5 other women the exact same thing. Love is just another tool for manipulation. The only thing I actually love is money. That's when the kitchen door burst open and FBI agents flooded into the room with weapons drawn. Federal agents. Nobody move. Agent Patricia Wells commanded, her gun trained on Marcus, while 2 other agents moved to secure Sophia. Marcus's face went through a series of expressions: surprise, anger, and finally, resignation. How did you... Mrs. Hartford called us yesterday. Patricia said, "We've been monitoring the house since early this morning. We heard every word of your confession." As the agents handcuffed Marcus, he looked at me with undisguised hatred. "You set us up." "I protected myself," I replied calmly, "something you should have considered before trying to murder a federal judge." Sophia was sobbing as they led her away, but she managed to look back at me one last time. "Mother, I'm so sorry. I never wanted this to happen." I met her eyes and saw my little girl there, terrified and broken by a man who had manipulated her into betraying everything she had been taught was right. "I know, sweetheart. We'll figure this out." But even as I said the words, I knew our relationship would never be the same. Some betrayals leave scars that never fully heal. The aftermath of Marcus's arrest unfolded like a complex legal case I might have presided over during my years on the federal bench. The evidence against him was overwhelming, not just from our recorded conversation, but from the investigation that followed. Agent Patricia Wells briefed me on the scope of Marcus's criminal enterprise 3 days after the arrests. We sat in my study, the same room where I'd first felt suspicious about his intentions, while she laid out the findings of a multi-state investigation. Marcus Castellano, his real name, has been running this con for over 8 years, Patricia explained, spreading photographs and documents across my desk. We've identified 6 previous victims across 4 states, all wealthy, elderly women with adult children he manipulated into participating. I studied the photographs of the victims, seeing my own potential fate reflected in their faces. What happened to the daughters in the other cases? Most received reduced sentences in exchange for testimony against Marcus. The pattern was always the same. He'd identify wealthy families through social networks, target vulnerable adult children who were in financial distress, then manipulate them into believing their parents' deaths were both inevitable and beneficial. How did he choose his victims? Patricia pulled out a thick file. Public records, obituaries, society pages. He looked for recently widowed women with substantial estates and children who might be susceptible to manipulation. Your husband's obituary mentioned your federal judge background and the Hartford Foundation, making you an obvious target. The calculation behind his selection process was both impressive and horrifying. Marcus had studied my family like a predator, researching prey, identifying our weaknesses and exploiting them with surgical precision. What about Sophia's legal situation? I asked, though I dreaded the answer. Patricia's expression grew sympathetic. She's been charged with conspiracy to commit murder and attempted murder. However, given the extent of Marcus's manipulation and her cooperation with our investigation, the prosecution is willing to consider a plea agreement. I spent the next week visiting Sophia in jail, trying to understand how my intelligent, educated daughter had been drawn into Marcus's web. The woman I spoke with bore little resemblance to the confident businesswoman I'd raised. "Mother, I know you must hate me," Sophia said during our first conversation, her orange jumpsuit a stark reminder of how far she had fallen. "I don't hate you," I replied honestly. "I'm heartbroken and confused, but I don't hate you." "I never meant for it to go this far," she continued, fresh tears streaming down her face. "At first, Marcus just asked questions about you, your routine, your health, your finances. I thought he was interested because he cared about me, about becoming part of our family." "When did it change?" Sophia was quiet for a long moment, staring at her hands. "When you refused to give us the money, Marcus became different, angry and controlling. He said you were standing in the way of our happiness, that you were too selfish to help your own daughter." "And you believed him?" "I wanted to believe him," my daughter admitted. "My business was failing, Mother. I was drowning in debt, and Marcus seemed like my salvation. He made me feel like I deserved better, like you owed me something because you'd spent so much time focused on your career instead of our family." The accusation stung because it contained a grain of truth. I had been a demanding career woman, spending long hours on the bench while Sophia was growing up. But I'd always believed I was building something important, creating a legacy of justice that would benefit society. So when he suggested the tea, he told me it would be peaceful. He said you were getting old anyway, that you were lonely and unhappy living in that big house by yourself. He made it sound like we'd be doing you a favor. I left that conversation feeling emotionally drained, but with a clearer understanding of how Marcus had manipulated my daughter's genuine grievances into justification for murder. The trial began 6 months later, and it was one of the most difficult experiences of my life. Sitting in the gallery, watching my daughter testify against the man she had once believed she loved was heartbreaking in ways I couldn't have imagined. Marcus's defense attorney tried to paint him as a victim of circumstance, a man who'd made poor choices but wasn't truly dangerous. The prosecution systematically demolished that narrative by presenting evidence from all 6 murder cases. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury," the prosecutor said during closing arguments, "Marcus Castellano didn't just commit attempted murder. He committed attempted murder 6 times, successfully murdering 5 elderly women and attempting to murder a 6th. This wasn't passion or desperation. This was a business model." The jury deliberated for less than 4 hours before returning with guilty verdicts on all charges. Marcus was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Sophia received the sentence of 15 years with the possibility of parole after 8, thanks to her cooperation and testimony. As they led her away, she looked at me one last time. "I love you, Mother." "I love you too," I replied, meaning every word despite everything that had happened. The months that followed were lonely ones. The Hartford estate felt emptier than it ever had, even during the years immediately after Charles's death. I found myself questioning everything, my parenting choices, my career priorities, the way I'd structured my relationships with family. But gradually, I began to rebuild. I increased my involvement with the Hartford Foundation, using my experience to help other families navigate legal challenges, and I also began speaking at conferences about elder abuse and financial exploitation, sharing my story to help others recognize the warning signs I'd missed. 1 year after the trial, I received an unexpected phone call. Sophia was calling from prison, something she did every few weeks to maintain our connection. "Mother," she said, "I've been thinking about what Marcus said during the trial, about how he chose us because we were vulnerable." "What about it?" "I realized that he was right, but not in the way he meant. We were vulnerable because I'd allowed resentment to build up between us over the years. If our relationship had been stronger, he never could have driven that wedge deeper." It was perhaps the most insightful thing Sophia had said since her arrest. "What are you suggesting?" "When I get out, I want us to try again, really try this time, without the baggage of old grievances and unspoken expectations. I want to earn back your trust and rebuild our relationship on a foundation of honesty." "I'd like that too, and I meant it." The conversation marked a turning point for both of us. We began having deeper, more honest discussions about our family history, my career choices, and the ways we'd both contributed to the distance that had grown between us. Marcus had tried to destroy our family for his own gain, but in the end, his evil had forced us to confront truths we'd been avoiding for years. 2 years had passed since that terrible October day when my daughter tried to poison me with tea. The Hartford estate felt different now, not empty, but peaceful in a way it hadn't been since Charles's death. I'd made changes, both practical and personal, that helped me feel safer and more connected to the world beyond my walls. The most significant change was my work with the Federal Bureau of Investigation's Elder Abuse Task Force. Agent Patricia Wells had invited me to join as a consultant, using my judicial experience and personal understanding of family manipulation to help train agents and assist in ongoing investigations. "Your case wasn't unique, unfortunately," Patricia had explained during our first official meeting. "Marcus Castellano was part of a larger network of criminals who specifically targeted elderly victims through family members. We need people who understand both the legal aspects and the psychological manipulation involved." The work was challenging but rewarding. I helped develop training materials for agents, reviewed case files to identify patterns of abuse, and occasionally testified in trials as an expert witness on family financial exploitation. It gave my retirement a sense of purpose I hadn't expected to find. On this particular Tuesday morning, I was reviewing files for an upcoming case when my housekeeper, Maria, knocked on my study door. "Mrs. Hartford," she said, "there's someone here to see you, a young woman who says she's been affected by Marcus Castellano." I looked up from my paperwork, intrigued. "Did she give you her name?" "Jennifer Walsh. She's very nervous, but she insisted it was important." Jennifer Walsh proved to be a woman in her early 30s with the kind of hollow-eyed exhaustion that spoke of a recent trauma. She sat across from my desk, clutching a manila folder, her hands trembling slightly as she spoke. "Mrs. Hartford, I read about your case in the newspaper, about how Marcus tried to kill you and manipulated your daughter. I think he did the same thing to my family." I set down my reading glasses and gave her my full attention. "Tell me what happened." Jennifer's story unfolded like a nightmare variation of my own experience. Marcus had targeted her widowed mother in Phoenix, Arizona, 3 years earlier, before he'd come to Boston. He'd used the same techniques, charming the adult child, identifying financial vulnerabilities, gradually manipulating the situation toward murder. My mother died of apparent heart failure. She was 74 and had some health issues, so everyone accepted it as natural causes. But now, after reading about your case and the other victims, I'm convinced Marcus killed her. What makes you think that? Jennifer opened her manila folder and spread out photographs, documents, and handwritten notes. After the funeral, I found these hidden in my mother's bedroom. Love letters from a man calling himself Michael Romano. but the handwriting matches samples of Marcus Castellano's writing that were published in the trial coverage. I examined the letters, immediately recognizing the calculated romantic language that Marcus had used to manipulate Sophia. The promises of eternal love, the flattery designed to make an elderly woman feel young and desirable again, the gradual requests for financial support disguised as romantic gestures. "There's more," Jennifer continued, pulling out bank statements. 3 months before she died, my mother withdrew $75,000 from her savings account. She told me it was for home improvements, but I never saw any work being done. Now I think she gave that money to Marcus. Did you report your suspicions to the police? Jennifer's face crumpled. I tried, but they said there wasn't enough evidence to reopen the case. The death certificate says natural causes, and there's no physical evidence of foul play. They suggested I was having trouble accepting my mother's death. I studied the materials Jennifer had brought, my prosecutorial instincts recognizing patterns that local police might miss. The timeline, the financial transactions, the romantic manipulation, it all fit Marcus's established method of operation. "Jennifer, I want you to know that I believe you," I said firmly. "What you've shown me is consistent with Marcus's other crimes. The problem is proving it after so much time has passed. Is there anything we can do?" I thought for a moment, then reached for my phone. "I'm going to call Agent Wells. The FBI task force has been working to identify all of Marcus's victims, and your mother's case could provide crucial evidence for their ongoing investigation." The call to Patricia led to a meeting the next week at the FBI's Boston Fields office. Jennifer and I sat in a conference room while the team of agents reviewed her evidence and compared it to their files on Marcus's other crimes. "This is exactly what we needed," Agent Martinez, Patricia's partner, said after examining Jennifer's materials. "We've been trying to establish a timeline of Marcus's activities before he came to Boston. Your mother's case fills in a crucial gap. Can you prove he killed her?" "Proving it in court would be challenging given the time that's passed," Patricia admitted. "But this evidence helps establish pattern and intent for our overall case against Marcus's network. We've discovered that he wasn't working alone." This was news to me. "What do you mean, network?" Patricia pulled out a complex organizational chart covered with photographs and connecting lines. Marcus was part of a larger criminal organization that specialized in targeting elderly victims. They shared information, techniques, and sometimes even victims. Your case helped us break open the entire operation. The scope of the conspiracy was staggering. Marcus had been just one member of a group that included forgers who created false identities, financial experts who helped move stolen money, and even a corrupt medical examiner who had falsified autopsy reports to hide evidence of poisoning. "How many victims are we talking about?" "At least 37 that we can confirm," Agent Martinez replied. "Possibly more. The organization had been operating for over 15 years. Jennifer gripped the edge of the table. 37 families destroyed by these monsters. "But they're finished now," Patricia said with satisfaction. "Thanks in large part to Mrs. Hartford's case, we've dismantled the entire network. 18 people have been arrested and we're still gathering evidence." The meeting concluded with agents taking custody of Jennifer's evidence and promising to keep her informed of any developments. As we left the FBI building, Jennifer turned to me with tears in her eyes. "Thank you for believing me. For the past 2 years, I felt like I was going crazy, knowing something was wrong, but not being able to prove it. I understand that feeling. But you trusted your instincts, and that's what matters. Your mother's case will help ensure that Marcus and his associates never hurt anyone else." That evening, I called Sophia during her scheduled phone time. Our conversations had become easier over the past year as we worked through the complex emotions surrounding her betrayal and manipulation. "Mother," she said when she heard my voice, "you sound different today. Something good happened." I told her about Jennifer's visit and the FBI's revelations about Marcus's criminal network. As I spoke, I could hear her breathing become more labored. 37 victims, she whispered. Mother, I almost made you number 38. But you didn't, I said firmly. When the moment came, you couldn't go through with it. That's what saved both of us. I keep thinking about what would have happened if you'd actually drunk that tea, if the FBI agents hadn't been there. I would have had to watch you die, knowing I was responsible. It was a conversation we'd had variations of many times, but it felt different today. There was less self-pity in Sophia's voice and more genuine remorse for the pain she had caused. Sophia, I want you to know that I've forgiven you, I said. Not because what you did was acceptable, but because I understand now how deeply Marcus manipulated you. He was a professional predator, and you were a victim too. Do you really mean that? I do. And when you're released, we're going to rebuild our relationship on a foundation of complete honesty. No more unspoken resentments, no more assumptions about what the other person is thinking or feeling. I'd like that more than anything. Sophia said, her voice thick with emotion. After ending the call, I sat in my study looking out at the garden where Charles had spent his final years. The October evening was crisp and clear, with stars beginning to appear in the darkening sky. For the first time since that terrible day when Sophia had brought me poisoned tea, I felt genuinely hopeful about the future. Marcus had tried to destroy my family for his own gain, but in the end, his evil had forced us to confront truths we'd been avoiding for years. Sophia would be eligible for parole in 6 more years, and when she was released, we would have a chance to build something better than what we had before. The Hartford estate no longer felt like a monument to isolation and wealth. It felt like a home where healing was possible, where love could survive even the deepest betrayals, and where justice, however delayed, would ultimately prevail. Some families are destroyed
by greed and manipulation. Others are made stronger by surviving them. I was determined that ours would be the latter.
4 years after the trial, I received the call I'd been both anticipating and dreading. Sophia was being released on parole 3 years early for good behavior and her continued cooperation with law enforcement investigations. She would be coming home in 2 weeks. I spent those 14 days preparing in ways both practical and emotional. The estate's guest wing was renovated to give Sophia privacy while she readjusted to life outside prison. I researched rehabilitation programs, job placement services, and therapy options for former inmates. But most importantly, I prepared myself to see my daughter as she was now, not as a woman I remembered from before Marcus entered our lives. The morning of her release, I drove to the Massachusetts Correctional Institution at Framingham with my hands trembling on the steering wheel. 4 years of weekly visits hadn't quite prepared me for this moment, the official end of her imprisonment and the beginning of whatever our relationship would become. Sophia emerged from the prison looking older than her 39 years, but with a dignity I hadn't seen since before she met Marcus. She wore simple clothes, jeans and a blue sweater I'd brought her, and carried a single bag containing her few possessions. When she saw me, she smiled with a genuine warmth, but didn't rush toward me. There was a careful respect in her approach that spoke of hard-won wisdom. "Hello, Mother," she said simply. "Welcome home, sweetheart," I replied, and we embraced with the tentative affection of 2 people learning to trust each other again. The drive back to Boston was quiet, but not uncomfortable. We'd said so much during our prison visits that there was no need for elaborate conversations about feelings or expectations. We both understood that this was a new beginning, not a return to what we had before. The estate's guest wing looks beautiful, Sophia said as we turned into the driveway. "You've made changes." I had indeed made changes. Security improvements, certainly, but also aesthetic ones that reflected my evolved perspective on what home should be. The gardens were more open, the interior lighting was warmer, and I'd removed some of the more formal furniture that had made the estate feel like a museum rather than a living space. I wanted it to feel more welcoming, less like a fortress and more like a place where people could actually relax and be themselves. Sophia's first weeks home were a careful dance of independence and reconnection. She applied for jobs, attended required parole meetings, and began seeing a therapist who specialized in helping people rebuild their lives after incarceration. She also spent time helping me with my work for the FBI task force, providing insights into victim psychology that proved invaluable. I understand now how Marcus identified vulnerable people, she told me one evening as we reviewed case files together. He looked for anyone who felt overlooked, undervalued, or resentful about their circumstances. Then he made them feel special while gradually isolating them from anyone who might see through his lies. That's exactly the pattern we've identified in other cases, I agreed. Your perspective helps us train agents to recognize these situations before they escalate to violence. 1 month after Sophia's release, we received unexpected news. Jennifer Walsh, the woman whose mother had been one of Marcus's earlier victims, had started a support group for families affected by elder abuse and financial exploitation. She wanted to invite both Sophia and me to speak at their first meeting. "I don't know if I'm ready for that," Sophia said when I told her about the invitation. "What if people hate me for what I did to you?" "I might," I said honestly, "but they also might benefit from hearing how manipulation can affect anyone, regardless of education or intelligence. Your story could help other families recognize warning signs before things escalate." After much consideration, we decided to accept the invitation. The meeting was held in a church basement in downtown Boston, attended by about 20 people whose families had been affected by various forms of elder abuse and financial exploitation. Their stories were heartbreakingly similar. Trusted family members or romantic partners who had exploited elderly victims for financial gain. When it was our turn to speak, Sophia stood before the group with quiet dignity and told our story from her perspective. She spoke about the gradual nature of Marcus's manipulation, how he'd used my genuine grievances against me to justify increasingly extreme actions, and how she had eventually lost sight of her own moral compass. "I want everyone here to understand that I take full responsibility for my choices," she said. "Marcus may have manipulated me, but I was an adult who chose to participate in a plan to murder my own mother. There's no excuse for that, and I'll spend the rest of my life trying to make amends." The response from the group was mixed, but largely positive. Several people thanked Sophia for her honesty, saying it helped them understand how their own family members had been drawn into similar situations. Others remained skeptical, which was entirely appropriate given the magnitude of what she had done. When I spoke, I focused on forgiveness, not as something Sophia had earned or deserved, but as a choice I'd made for my own healing. Holding on to hatred and resentment would have destroyed me. Forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting or excusing what happened. It means choosing to build something better from the ruins of what was destroyed. That night, as Sophia and I sat in the study, going over feedback from the support group meeting, I realized something important had shifted in our relationship. We were no longer just mother and daughter trying to repair damage from the past. We had become partners in a mission to help other families avoid the destruction that nearly consumed us. "Mother," Sophia said, "I want to go back to school, get a degree in social work or victim advocacy. I want to spend my life helping people the way you and Jennifer have helped me." I looked at my daughter, really looked at my daughter, and saw someone I'd never met before. Not the successful businesswoman she had been before Marcus, not the broken woman who tried to poison me, but someone entirely new. Someone forged by suffering, but not destroyed by it. "I think that's a wonderful idea," I said, "and I'd like to help make it happen." As I sit here now, 5 years after that terrible October day when my daughter brought me poisoned tea, I can say with certainty that evil sometimes carries within it the seeds of unexpected grace. Marcus Castellano tried to destroy our family for his own gain, but his failure forced us to confront truths about ourselves and our relationship that we might never have faced otherwise. Sophia now works as a victim advocate with the State Attorney General's office, helping other families navigate the legal and emotional challenges of elder abuse cases. Our relationship has become deeper and more honest than it ever was before the crisis that nearly ended my life. The Hartford estate is no longer a fortress where a Lowry widow counts her money in isolation. It's become a place where healing happens, where broken relationships can be rebuilt, and where the past, however painful, can be transformed into a foundation for something better. That brings us to the end of our story here at Hidden Hearth. What started as a simple request for wedding money revealed a deadly conspiracy that nearly destroyed a family, but ultimately led to healing, justice, and a bond stronger than ever before. If this story of survival, forgiveness, and redemption touched your heart, please give it a like and subscribe to Hidden Hearth for more stories where family secrets come to light and love finds a way to triumph over even the darkest betrayals. Hit that notification bell so you never miss our latest episodes, and let us know in the comments where you're watching from around the world. Remember, every family has secrets, but not every family has the courage to face the truth when those secrets threaten everything they hold dear. At Hidden Hearth, we believe that even the most devastating betrayals can become the foundation for something stronger and more beautiful than what came before. Until next time, this is Hidden Hearth, where the most extraordinary stories of survival and love unfold behind ordinary doors. Thank you for joining us on this incredible journey.